Got for two. Today. Here's the end result, day 3. I moved the rest of the stuff from the back of the barn, found a new home for it, enough to get these ramps in here. Now these ramps do come apart in pieces, so it's not as daunting of a task as it looks like. They actually, each ramp is in 3 sections. But I promise you, they're still pretty heavy. I tried backing the car up on the ramps, but it doesn't have enough grip in the rear and it just starts sliding. So if I want to put this on with the rear bumper first, I'm going to have to use the winch to pull it up. Let's have a look underneath. So the trailing arm bushings, both front and rear, are gone. The exhaust is rough, but not too bad. Emergency brake cable is snapped. We knew that already. Fuel line looks like it could use a bit of attention before it starts to burst. What else we got here? That floor pan needs some attention. I got 30 days to fix a 30-year-old car. So today I was able to tear apart quite a bit more of the front end here. Of course, I keep finding more and more problems and things that need to be fixed, so it's a little bit discouraging. I just have to keep working at it. The lower control arm bolts are really stuck. I spent a lot of time working on the upper control arm bolt just to get that removed. And it was not an easy task. And I got it out. It's hiding over here. And it needs some repair work. I bolted the ball joint back on because it was starting to bend and flex when I was trying to push the bushings out. So without the ball joint bolted in, this thing has zero strength left, so I have to build this back up and make something on the nose of this so it's stronger. But there is still time to make that go. I've got the spindle. I soaked it down with some PB to help kick off some of that rust on it. And this is that bolt for the upper control arm. I'm just soaking it as well to try to get that last chunk of bushing off. I'll probably cut it tomorrow. And then the bolt will be ready because I got to reuse it for the new stuff. Took the spring out. This is probably part of the reason why the front end was so low on that car. We had that whole last section of the coil snapped. So both front springs on this car were trashed, and that explains part of the reason why it was so low. Didn't help that all the bushings were gone. If they cannot get me a replacement spring, I think that 4-door is going to be a donor, and I may just cut my way into those parts. But I got to keep moving forward here. Passenger side control arm is going to get a bit of attention right now. Time to get the wire wheel out and clean her up. Alright, so not so much footage today, and I apologize. But those are the brand new calipers I picked up. That was the emergency brake cable that I was waiting for. There's a couple of seals for the front end that are in now. I'm still trying to source a bushing for the rear trailing arm. As you saw me painting, lower control arms are finally out. Whatever bushings are left over have been pressed out. That was a task, let me tell you. So the car itself is not so bad right now. I mean, there's a lot of rust repair that needs to be attended to, and I have to kind of go through that little bit by little bit, but it's a work in progress. Those control arms, though, they killed me. That was all day trying to remove both of those. The bolts were all stuck and seized, but now it's out and it's time for new parts. So I gotta let this paint cure. I just laid it on. On a level of 1 to 10, I think this gets about a 13 in sketchiness. Let's take this down nice and slow here. There's still some weight on that post too. That's funny. Oh man. Watching those springs go down was very satisfying. definitely satisfying for me to watch. So here we go. I don't know if this is now 11 days in. Feels about right. It's been pretty long days for me doing this kind of stuff. It's not easy, but I knew it was. Not sure where it cut me off again, but basically the next step is floor repair, so I have to get ready for that stuff, which means fuel tank has to come out and all the long. got some floor patches going in now. Those screws aren't staying. They're just there to kind of hold everything in shape, and then once I finish booger welding all the way around the outside edge, the screws come out and the holes will get filled. So that's good. So far this rear section's coming together. That seat mount, I was able to reuse the existing seat mount, what was originally on the car, and I'm going to eventually weld that to the bottom of this plate that I put in, and then that stud should stay there and be ready to go for when the seat's all set to go back in. The front section has to still be attended to, but I got to get some more, anyway, I got to get some more welding wire no matter what. But that's the progress so far. The front wheel's on the passenger side. It wasn't on yesterday. Alrighty, so the passenger side is no more Swiss cheese. Everything's buttoned up in here. I don't know that I'd try to fill her with water, but we're certainly doing better than we were. I noticed a little bit back there behind the seat belt and into the floor area. You can see some light coming through, but I'm not sure. I might have to do that from underneath. Anyways, I'm going to move over to the driver's side floor pan now. Got a ton of cleanup to do. I'm starting to tie back the bottom of the floor pan into the rocker that still exists. I've got to get some more sheet metal to do this driver's side floor, but we are certainly making some progress. So the fuel line came off in almost one continuous piece. I had one little break. The GoPro battery's dying, so I was just saying, I've got the fuel line off. It came off in almost one continuous piece. I had one little break in it toward the spot where it dives up under the hood. Now I can 100% replicate that now. It came out in a good enough condition where I'm able to basically copy it. So that should be perfect. I shouldn't have to do any guessing with regard to the routing for the fuel line. And I'm hoping that the rear brake line will come out with similar results. There's a lot of grease under the car that's been used to preserve it, so I'm thinking that I might get lucky enough to be able to take that out again in almost one continuous piece. Same with the vapor line for the fuel tank. So I'm thinking that that one I might get just as lucky with. If not, I'll certainly make it work. I think I can almost duplicate the rear brake line, a very similar pattern. But anyways, today was a great day for progress. It's been cold. I got a sweater on today. Super breezy. It's kind of rainy outside. Here it's supposed to warm up again next week, but I'm definitely on my way here. So the car's back on all four wheels. I still have to do the rear end stuff, which includes shocks, rear brakes. Then I have to plumb the brakes after I finish patching the floor, and then I have to go under the hood and patch a lot of the repair a lot of the cut wire that was under the hood from whatever happened to it before I got it. But and I may have to swap the passenger door for another one because that one's really rotten. We're gonna see what happens though. So thanks guys for watching up till now. Let's see what happens tomorrow. So this is the rear trailing arm now with bushings in it. These are not Chevette specific bushings. You can see the original bolt in there is quite loose. That just means it needs new hardware. Not a problem. This is the makeshift fix that we've come up with here. This is a bushing for another vehicle, and on that right now is a piece of stainless steel just wrapped around to absorb some of the extra space. So these ones have already been pressed in, and that stainless steel makes that bushing just the right size to fit in these existing trailing arms. So I'm going to remove the trailing arm on the passenger side right now, prep both of them, paint both of them, and then install them. So let's get this show on the road. Trailing arms are both back into the car. They're not torqued to be tight yet. I'm going to wait till the car is sitting down on all fours before I do anything like that. But they are back in and ready to go. So now that's done, I can continue on the floor repairs tomorrow. So yesterday off camera, and I apologize for that, I finished the floor repair in the front on the driver's side. I got those big patches welded in and done, and you just watched me pour down a bunch of paint. Literally poured it down and just spread it around with the brush. That was a lot more efficient, and a big heavy coat of paint in there is certainly not going to hurt. So both sides are done like that. Wherever there was rust, repair done, plus a lot of the common areas that'll rot on these vehicles. So this one should be covered up for a while, hopefully extending its life a bit. I'm going to leave the doors propped open in this sucker tonight, let the paint dry a little bit. Tomorrow I've got some undercarriage work to dive into. I got to start trying to replicate some lines and figure out mounting tabs for them, probably remake some, but we'll get there tomorrow. So I think for tonight it's cleanup time and back inside. summary for today. I replicated the original fuel line with new line, bent it, installed it in the car. It's not terminated on either end. It's because the gas tank's still out of the car. I drained, I don't know, a lot of fuel out of this tank to check how it looked. It looked really clean. There's 4 bottles I wound up with over there. I filled my lawnmower. I filled a little 5-gallon 2-stroke mix, and there's still a little bit left, but it was very clean, so I'm thinking that I'm not too worried about getting the rest of it out of there. Front brakes. Take a look in there. You see this new line going up and in? That goes through the fender well just like it used to, and into the distribution block. From the distribution block going down, there's a line that comes up, follows the firewall, under the heater box, back down and around, and out to the passenger side front tire. So that means that, there we go. As of now, the front brakes are plumbed and ready. I have to bleed them. I have to replace the rear brake line, and that goes to a flex line above the axle right in that area and ties into that distribution block on the rear diff. I'm going to change that rear brake line, and that flex line I'm going to replace it, just change it because I don't know how long it's been there. Those steel lines look great, so I'm probably going to leave those. I have to do rear brakes, put the shocks in, put the gas tank in, fill it with fuel, put the interior in, bleed the brakes, fix all the cut wires under the hood. This is the interior now after more than 24 hours of this thing sitting to dry, and it's looking a lot like a floor in here. We might just make this deadline after all. Today. Number 1, I rebuilt the fuel tank strap mount inside the back of the car under all that stuff. I had to reinforce the whole floor area there. There were some patches already in, but they were only riveted. They weren't welded. So, fuel tank is now installed back in the car. Rear shocks are in. Rear brake line has been replaced, and I've got that new one all the way to the front and tied in. The fuel lines are connected to the tank. The new parking brake cable and the new brake pads spring kit has been put on the rear passenger side. Tomorrow I want to tackle the rear driver's side parking brake cable assembly and the pads and the spring kit. I have to get some more grease for my grease gun because I ran out today. But this is the last brake that I have to deal with, and then I can worry about bleeding the brakes the rest of the way through. You see a couple of new lines down in there. I have to make the connection from the new fuel line to the new fuel filter. But what I'm going to do is basically purge it first and pump some fuel through before I connect it to the engine, so any debris that might have gotten in that line will have a chance to flush out before it goes into the carb. So I didn't record anything yesterday, but I finished the last rear brake. The spring kit and all that stuff went back in. This side was a lot easier. Of course, the driver's side is the one that fights me. And I just finished replacing the hood pull cable because the old one on this car was busted. I originally took it out of the 4-door for obvious reasons. That one was broken, so I ended up going back to the 2-door that we robbed the springs out of. So now we have a hood release lever that's functioning. So perfect. Next, I just started piecing together the fuel line and the filter. Just some rubber hose and gear clamps and an inline. So I'm going to put some fuel in the tank, and I want to flush the line out just to make sure that there's nothing in there that could be potentially harmful. And then we're going to connect it to the filter after we've got a little bit of fuel coming out of the line. Hook it up, and we'll see if this is going to start after sitting for so long now. So here is my plan to try to push fuel out here and prime it. I'm going to disconnect the evap hose from the line that goes back to the tank. And I've got some clean fuel line, this hasn't been used yet, that I'm just going to put over there. And I'm literally going to blow through it and see if I can't make enough positive pressure to push out some fuel. Okay, so I've got my air compressor now. This will make it a heck of a lot easier to do. Nice clean fuel pouring out of here now. Beautiful. There was a lot of brown coming out of there. So I figured the tank would have had some dirt in it, and I wanted to kind of flush that before we started hooking this up to the car again. So now we've got a good flow of fuel following us. Look at that. We are on the filter. Excellent. So now I have to snug up the gear clamp and hold this guy in place. We can try firing it up. Alright, I just poured some fuel down her throat. That makes sense. Fan belt. Alright, so it runs. Doesn't run all that bad considering it's been sitting for so long. Sun's just starting to set, so it is time to call it a night. I removed the headliner from in the car. That's one of the things that I've been meaning to repair, but at the minimum it has to come out in order to drive, because otherwise that thing's flopping around and making a big old mess. So I took out the headliner, and I'm going to try to get that re-glued before we go. Maybe my wife will help me. Additionally, I'd removed the side windows. I've got replacement hinges. One of the members on the Chevette page, on the Chevette group here, has been kind enough to remanufacture some. So I purchased some replacement hinges for the glass. And one of them broke when I was taking it apart, but I expected that to happen anyways. So I don't know if I'll drive with windows popped open at any point in time, but if I wanted to, I suppose those new hinges could hold up. Also, my roof was jumped on once. You can still see there's a dip here in the middle, and I pushed and pushed and pushed, but The issue is this strut right in the center here. If I was to weld that to the roof panel, it would hold it up, and I think it would just get rid of that shape in it. But right now it's not a priority at all. Everything else is. Getting the alignment done, getting this thing actually on the road. I still have to bleed the brakes. That's why it's in the barn. It's a lot easier to get under the car when it's up in the air like this. And I have to reload my grease gun and grease the upper ball joint on the passenger side because I ran out. Tomorrow will be another day and I will make some more progress on it again. But so far I'm happy with what's been happening. This is really exciting for me. So I started cleaning it and putting it all back together. First thing I did was vacuumed out the whole car. Then I reinstalled the rear seat, starting with the pad, the lower section, the upper section. I put all the spare tire back, the jack, tire iron, all that stuff. Laid the carpet back in, stretched it out as it should. Put the side trim in. I've just got the seats going in now. Seat belts are going back in, so the interior is going to be back together, minus the headliner. My wife just came out into the barn here and gave me a hand. We bled the brakes, so this car will stop when required. So now I have to put the console back in, clean that, put a few covers on the seats. I think I have to adjust the shift linkage under the steering column, and then we are done in the interior, with the exception of the headliner. But that'll come tomorrow or day after that or something. Address that parking brake cable situation with the clearance. It looks awfully crude. Let me explain it. It's just a piece of EMT bent with a little bit of a sweep on it, not much at all, just to allow for an extra barrier for that cable. So the cable passes through the pipe and is nowhere connected inside that conduit. I used a leftover brake shoe spring just to keep that conduit in place at the fitting where the cable needs to pivot, going straight back to that rear end. I'm just working on my tape measure alignment here. If nobody's ever done this before, the easiest way that I've ever found to do it is to basically put long straight boards or something, attach them to the rim, make sure that they're true, and then you measure from tip to tip in the front, tip to tip in the back, and split the difference. If you're out by 3 inches between the front to the back, that means on one end you've got to bring it in about 1.5 inches to balance that out. And this is only to get close. You're going to be a rough estimate here, enough to drive it to an alignment shop and get a proper alignment done by a professional. Again, this is like a makeshift driveway alignment setup. You can pull it off. Having the vehicle on the ground is better because when the suspension isn't compressed, the geometry of the suspension changes and that tire position may adjust itself accordingly. But this is basically a way to get by in a pinch. Yesterday we had the whole headliner glued up. The problem was the shape kind of got a little bit skewed, more than likely when I washed it. So, fortunately, it hadn't really adhered that well to the foam. Peeled it back, we tried stretching and gluing it again, and again it wasn't quite right. And trying to reuse the original material, I think, is the biggest fault here. What I've done now is taken the cardboard, we've glued the foam to it. The foam is stuck very well. Then it got to the point of stretching the cloth to fit what this shape requires, and then having some slack enough to pull it down over the edge and glue in behind. So the clothespins are kind of keeping everything in shape. And it's been steamed, and it really relaxed the cloth quite a bit. So I think now we'll have a really good chance of getting this glued and stretched out properly. Probably going to start in the middle and ultimately work our way around to the edges, and that way we should be able to keep this same shape. So if you see any weird spots, it's because I used the steamer to try to get this thing to droop and stretch back to where it should be. But we're all lined up now with the holes that are required in the headliner for the visors, for the pins. So I think this will be our best option yet. So I've got to buy another can of adhesive and just go to town on it this time. And this will be the last ditch effort with the glue. But then the headliners should stay and be the correct shape for the rest of the time that it's in that car. A little update on progress. The rear windows are back in the car. I officially have a headliner again. Let's have a look here. I even have a dome light. So the material isn't perfect. I made some mistakes with the headliner, but I did learn a lot. These stains were there from previous. There was rips in it. But the glue that we used this time is a lot sturdier, so we should have a lot more luck with it holding up long term. Let's see here. I adjusted the parking brake. It grabs much better. I also was able to get the rear brakes to self-adjust by going backwards and hitting the brakes. I put new windshield wipers on it. I changed the spark plugs. I put my K&N air filter in it. I have to oil that still. Not really a big concern there. I have a ton of tools in the back of this thing. That was just simplicity. I have to look at this seat still and figure out why I can't make it adjust up anymore. There's something going on with it that's kind of weird. The passenger one goes quite a bit higher up than the driver's side. And I think there's just something in the seat that's funky. So I'm going to try to dig into that and figure it out. But this car is ultimately ready to hit the road at this point. There's very few things left to take care of. Little details, like I need a light in the console so it illuminates the gear selector position. I think otherwise, the lights in here are very, very minimal otherwise, but that is okay with me. The radio doesn't light up, but that's alrighty. This is good. This is a lot of fun, this project so far. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to the finished product. just finished putting the last tire on it. So those are my good used tires. And at the same time, I threw on my brand new mud flaps. So let's put this guy on the ground. I only just started it, that's why it's puttering. I didn't even give it any gas. Car's all back together. So today is the first official test drive. I've got a dealer plate, so now I can actually take it, get it appraised, have the safety done. I have to take it for an alignment. I have to test drive it to make sure there's no bugs and try to work everything out, but here we go. So that was the first official test drive of the car, and I actually took it out and got to drive it. 221,781. So there are some more kilometers on it than when we started. I think I'm close to having put almost 100 kilometers on it now since I've got it. That's definitely something. Today was a big step. So taking the car through its paces, making sure it shifted okay, the brakes were okay, that it stopped, steered, and all that stuff. It's pretty good. I was a little bit leery about getting up to 100 kilometers an hour on this little section of 401 that I was on. It's really loud and the alignment is not quite right, so I think that's going to have a lot to do with how it physically drives. But it was really darty on the highway, and I'm kind of not too happy about that, but I'm thinking that once the alignment's done, I'll try it again and see where it's at. And it should be a little bit better because it's not going to be wanting to pull so bad. Each time I shut the car off and wanted to start it, we'll try it right now because it's been off for now a few minutes. It fires right up. It doesn't hesitate at all. So once this car's warmed up, it runs well, which is definitely a good thing. The radio works, the blower works, the defrost is working, the lights are working, the interior lights are working with the exception of the bulb that I haven't changed, but I have a bunch there. I brought my GPS along for the drive just to compare what the speedometer said and what the actual GPS speed was. They're very close. This speedometer is a little bit slow, so when I'm actually showing 80 on this speedometer, I'm going a little bit faster, maybe 3 kilometers an hour faster. So I'd say that's a pretty forgivable margin of error. One big thing I wanted to do is make sure that the front end had a chance to settle. What I mean is, because I changed the coil springs and everything on the car is ultimately new, until I take it for an actual drive out on the road, things aren't going to really seat in until after you hit a few bumps and get things kind of rolling as they should. So this side looks pretty true. The wheel looks relatively parallel with the rear wheel. I'm not too displeased with that. This side, you can tell, is way out of adjustment. Not an issue. I'm going to adjust it right now. So I pulled the wheel off. I was able to adjust the upper ball joint, but I found a problem, and I figure this is exactly why that wheel was looking really funky and why the car was pulling so bad. The mount for the upper control arm has broken away from the cradle. So the upper control arm is being held on by some kind of little magic bits of whatever's left under the car. So I am so lucky that that wheel didn't fold right underneath the car when I was driving. Somebody was obviously watching out for me. So this car's not going for safety today. I need to reinforce that right away and build it up. Here's exactly the problem. It's no longer secured to the car. So yeah, can you imagine hitting the brakes, going 100 kilometers an hour? Look at the dents in the wheel well, because it totally happened. So I'm taking the upper control arm bolt out. I'm moving the control arm out of the way. I'm going to pull the rotor down. I'm going to leave everything else connected. That's going to give me access up here. Hopefully I'm able to pull this tube of steel off of the bolt. Then I need to reinforce and brace that and weld it back to the car. I'm going to use some square tube, some angle iron, my welder, whatever else I have to do to make that stay in place. So here's the montage of me tearing apart the car I just finished. So I've boxed it all up now. I know the booger welds look pretty bad, but I can promise you that I had to turn it down because otherwise they get too hot and they just burn right through the thinner stuff. The big plate is really got a lot of good penetration on it. So that's awesome. That little tube should not come off now. And I can't really go backwards and tie it to the car because this is the front cross member and it's actually removable. Those two bolts that you can see actually let this whole subframe get dropped from the car, and that's what you're supposed to do, is replace these things, but I don't have the time, nor do I have one. Friday is coming and I want to get this thing rolling and have it safe, and I think this is probably about as good as it's going to get at this point. So now, since I'm here and the wheel's off, I'm going to start some structure repair on this car because it obviously needs some love, so it's time to do it right now. Alright, I've been at this for probably about 3.5 hours. Here's where we are at now. The top spring mount has a big piece of plate bent up and over the hoop that catches the upper control arm, and it's welded all the way around. Both sides of that are boxed and plated, and it's all tied back to the structure of the car there. So I think that part is going to be fine. And then all of the whole stuff that was all kinds of holy there tying into the fender has been tied back now with just thinner sheeted plates and welded all the way back and through. I'm not a professional welder, we know this, and I'm not finished yet, but this is as far as I'm going to go. I'm going to slap some black paint on it, the gloss Tremclad that I've got, and that's going to be all she wrote. Got to get my anti-seize and put this all back together now. I'm going to put new anti-seize because I heated it up and I think I burned most of it out of that pipe. But I want to make sure that that upper bolt is lubed up as good as I can get it, because taking it out was not an easy task, and I'll be damned if I'm going to have to fight it again. So this car looks a lot more intact now. Here's to hoping that next time I roll down the road, the front tire doesn't try to get away from the car so much. The car has gone back together. Wheels torqued back on. Let's go for a quick rip and see how that alignment feels. Not sure if you guys can see me, but this is 80 kilometers an hour. The car isn't pulling anywhere near as much as it was. Closer to 90 now, so we better bring her down. Let's get on the brakes and see. It doesn't dive, it's consistent. Good. I think we are back in business here. Let's see if we can't get that safety tomorrow now. My appointment is 8 a.m. so I'm going to get up. I will be in this car before 7:30 and already heading there. I plan to be on site waiting for the guys to arrive. Let's do this. We have got the safety. The car has passed. Also had an alignment done. called the insurance company to get insurance put on the car. Of course, their systems are down today, but test driving some more won't hurt.